Imagine waking up one day to discover that every choice you thought was yours was actually a string pulled by invisible hands. Ever felt someone was tugging at the edges of your thoughts, shaping the way you see the world without you even noticing? You're not alone. The feeling is like being a puppet on a stage, your strings hidden in the shadows, constantly being reattached by forces you can't see. What are the tactics that can turn anyone into a puppet, and why are they so dangerous today? I'm a researcher of human behavior, and I've spent years dissecting the covert strategies that influence us. In a world where social media feeds echo our own beliefs, political narratives spread like wildfire, and sales funnels promise instant success, the ability to spot manipulation has become a survival skill. In the next 10 minutes, you'll learn the most dangerous manipulation tactics, see real-world examples, and walk away with practical red flags to protect yourself. Let's pull the curtain back on the playbook. The first tactic is emotional blackmail. This is the art of leveraging love, guilt, or a sense of obligation to force compliance. It works because our brain's reward system lights up when we feel connected to someone we care about, and the fear of losing that connection becomes a powerful motivator. Picture a friend who constantly texts, "If you really cared, you'd help me now," or a family member who says, "I can't believe you'd abandon us after everything we've been through." The words feel personal, but they're a calculated lever. The victim often thinks, "I can't say no without being selfish," and ends up giving in to protect the relationship. The red flag signs are repeated "if you love me" statements, guilt trips that hinge on your sense of duty, and threats that you'll be upset if you don't comply. When you notice that every request is wrapped in a plea for love or fear of disappointment, you're looking at emotional blackmail. The second tactic is gaslighting, a systematic denial of facts that makes the target doubt their own memory or sanity. This technique exploits the brain's need for coherence. When reality feels unstable, we instinctively look for an external source to explain the dissonance, often surrendering to the gaslighter's version of events. Think of the classic television scene where a husband insists his wife never said a certain thing, even though she remembers it clearly, or a modern example where a coworker repeatedly tells you that your ideas were never shared, even though you have emails to prove otherwise. The victim's inner voice becomes a whisper of doubt. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. The warning signs include phrases like, "You're too sensitive," "That never happened," and "Everyone thinks you're overreacting." When you hear a pattern of constant contradiction and dismissal, it's often a gaslighting attempt. These two tactics illustrate how manipulation can infiltrate both our emotions and our perception of reality. They are the foundation for many larger schemes we see in headlines about scandals, mass panic, and sudden shifts in public opinion. Understanding them is the first step toward protecting yourself. What do you think about these tactics? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear your perspective. Now let's shift our focus to the third weapon in this covert arsenal: the artful use of fear as a lever. Fearmongering works by amplifying perceived threats, real or imagined, until the audience feels a pressing need to act, often without pausing to examine the facts. At its core, this tactic hijacks the brain's survival circuitry, the same system that once helped our ancestors avoid predators in the wild. When the amygdala lights up, the rational prefrontal cortex gets sidelined, and decisions become driven by the urgent desire to protect oneself or loved ones. Consider the wave of panic that swept through social media a few months ago when a rumor spread that a certain popular app was secretly harvesting personal data and selling it to advertisers. Within hours, influencers were posting dramatic warnings, urging followers to delete the app immediately or risk financial ruin. The story was later debunked by independent investigators, but not before thousands of users had uninstalled the app, many of them feeling a lingering sense of betrayal. A similar pattern emerges in political campaigns, where a candidate might repeatedly claim that the opposing side plans to dismantle essential services, even when there is little evidence to back up such claims. The repetition of alarmist language, the vivid imagery of loss, and the urgent calls to act now create a feedback loop where fear becomes the primary motivator. For the person on the receiving end, the emotional fingerprint of fearmongering feels like a knot in the chest, a constant low-grade anxiety that intensifies each time the message is reinforced. You start to question every neutral statement, looking for hidden dangers. You may find yourself double-checking sources, yet paradoxically, the more you search, the more you encounter content that confirms the original scare, because algorithms tend to amplify sensational material. The red flag checklist for this tactic includes repeated warnings about imminent danger, language that emphasizes, "You must act now," appeals to personal safety or financial security, and a noticeable absence of concrete evidence or balanced viewpoints. When you notice that the narrative is built around dread rather than data, you are likely staring at fearmongering in action. The final, and perhaps most insidious, manipulation technique is the systematic division of groups to weaken collective resistance. This strategy, often described as divide and conquer, thrives on sowing mistrust among individuals who might otherwise unite against a common challenge. By highlighting differences, amplifying grievances, and creating an us versus them mentality, manipulators can fracture solidarity and keep people focused on internal conflict instead of the external source of pressure. A vivid illustration of this tactic can be seen in certain marketing campaigns that segment audiences into exclusive clubs, each promised a unique benefit that the others do not receive. The messaging subtly suggests that those who do not belong to a particular group are missing out, fostering envy and competition. In the political arena, leaders may exploit identity politics, framing policy debates as battles between distinct demographic groups, each portrayed as either victims or perpetrators. By doing so, the broader systemic issues get obscured, and the audience's energy is redirected toward defending their own tribe. Those caught in the web of divide and conquer often experience a persistent sense of alienation, coupled with an uneasy alertness to perceived slights from the other side. Conversations become fraught with suspicion, and the desire to protect one's own group can override the impulse to seek common ground. The warning signs appear as language that categorizes people into rigid categories, frequent references to the other side, and an emphasis on loyalty to a specific faction over shared goals. When you hear repeated calls to stay loyal or don't trust those who think differently, you are likely witnessing this manipulative divide at work. So far, we've dissected emotional blackmail, gaslighting, fearmongering, and the divide and conquer approach. Each one taps into a different aspect of human psychology: our need for connection, our desire for a stable reality, our primal survival instincts, and our tribal instincts. By recognizing the patterns, you can reclaim agency over your thoughts and decisions. The next step is to arm yourself with practical habits that act as a shield against these tactics. First, cultivate a habit of pausing before you react. When a message triggers an intense emotional response, be it guilt, fear, or anger, take a breath and give yourself a moment to assess the situation. Ask yourself what evidence supports the claim, who stands to benefit from your reaction, and whether the language used is trying to shortcut your critical thinking. Second, diversify your information sources. If you notice that a particular narrative is only appearing within a single echo chamber, seek out alternative viewpoints. This doesn't mean you have to accept every opposing argument, but exposing yourself to a broader spectrum of data can help you spot inconsistencies and hidden agendas. Third, develop a personal checklist of red flags. When you encounter a request framed as, "If you love me," "If you care about your family," "If you want to stay safe," or "If you want to protect your community," pause and examine whether the appeal is leveraging an emotional lever rather than presenting a logical argument. Write down the phrases that feel manipulative and refer back to them when similar language resurfaces. Finally, practice open dialogue with trusted individuals. Sharing your concerns with friends or mentors can provide an external perspective, and sometimes simply voicing your doubts can diminish the power of the manipulative narrative. When you feel isolated, the manipulator's grip tightens. When you feel supported, the grip loosens. Now that we've uncovered the playbook, I'm curious, have you ever experienced any of these tactics in your own life? Maybe a friend tried to guilt you into a favor, or you've seen a headline that made you panic before you could verify the facts. Drop a story in the comments. Hearing real-world examples helps us all stay vigilant.
If this deep dive resonated with you, consider giving this video a thumbs up.
Your feedback not only fuels the channel but also signals to the platform that thoughtful content is worth sharing. And if you'd like to keep exploring the hidden mechanisms that shape our world, feel free to subscribe. It's a simple click, but it ensures you won't miss future investigations into the subtle forces that influence us daily. Remember, knowledge is the antidote to manipulation. By understanding how these tactics operate, you reclaim the power to decide for yourself, rather than being nudged down a hidden pathway. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep questioning the narratives that cross your screen. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep your mind sharp and your heart grounded.